Morning, driving down the road. I am officially back on the clock. I am in the backwoods of Texas, heading towards northern Indiana. I'll get about halfway there today between Houston and Fort area. Driving along, I like to drive and think. I like to listen to audiobooks. I like to run my mouth. And I used to do a lot of writing. I don't do it anymore. I do this. And the topic today, if anybody's interested, is air-to-air combat. Now, the first things in combat that flew were hot air balloons. And that happened during the American Civil War, to my knowledge, as far back as we go. And they would take hot air balloons behind friendly lines, and you would light them up and let them climb up to altitude, and a guy would sit in a basket with a pair of binos or a monocular and look at enemy positions, and however they use signals to tell the people down below what was going on. Would use it for adjusting your forces or artillery, which I don't think artillery went all that far, but you basically had a bird's eye view of the situation. And then in 1903, the first actual airplane was built. That for controlled flight, not just flight, not gliding, but actual controlled flight, was 1903. So World War I comes around, and airplanes are used for the same purpose as they were during, I'm going to slow down a little bit, during the Civil War. They were used for observation. So you had people, pilots on both sides, flying over the opposing sides' trenches, let's say World War I. And the pilots would wave to each other. Because they're all doing the same mission. You got a pilot, you'd have an observer, and you would have a camera. Oxy, and the observer would literally, crash out. The observer would literally bend over the side and hang his body over the side, look down, and fire off a shot and get a picture, and then they'd go back and develop the film and look at it. Well, at some point during the opening parts of World War I, these pilots that were strictly observers would fly by, and one of them pulled out a handgun and popped a shot at the other guy. So then all of a sudden these guys would fly by, one pass, and fire a handgun around at each other. And then somebody fired a rifle shot, and the observer was holding the weapon. And then somebody got an automatic weapon and started shooting, and then all of a sudden you have air-to-air combat that just kind of appeared one day. It just started organically, and that's how the air-to-air idea came into being. And then you started having the aces, and they had to determine who's what, and how do you confirm a kill. And in World War I, if you shot down an enemy aircraft, it had to go down on your side of the lines. I mean, I don't know whose idea that was, but if the plane didn't get shot down on your side of the lines, it didn't count. And a lot of the times what would happen, because remember the planes back then flew at, the assault with camels and whatnot. The plane didn't go 90, 100 miles an hour, and in air-to-air, and flying, that's not very fast. Well, a plane would get shot down, and again, as long as it was on your side of the lines, the other pilot the pilot that did the shooting would land and get out, and the pilots would talk about it. They would have a discussion about the air-to-air combat they just had. That's how bizarre it was during that time frame. Well, along comes World War II, and countries had test beds for World War II technology and World War II weapons. The Chinese started fighting in Manchuria in the 30s, and they got to try out their new monowing planes, because remember, in World War I, it was a bi-wing plane. And hi to everybody. Samantha, how you doing? I'm talking about air-to-air combat. So you had these bi-wing planes, and as technology, aviation technology, started moving along. I got to turn. Do I turn here? It's not Caroline Street. Hold on here. I got to turn. Caroline. Is this Caroline? This looks like Caroline. Okay, I'm turning here. Hold on. This is one of these little Texas towns I like. Got a neat look to them. That guy's not going up. So, with technology increased, technology moved forward, they went to the monowing plane, got rid of the support struts and all the cross beams, made the planes faster. And if you look at the German fighter plane, the iconic plane of the war, the ME-109 or BF-109, depending on who made it, it had a 20 millimeter cannon in the nose, but it had top of the engine that shot through the propeller, and that was a throwback because that's how the Germans designed the weapon to work, where there was an interrupter so the bullets wouldn't actually hit the propeller. And Hermann Göring, who was in charge of the Luftwaffe of the German Air Force, he insisted on that because that was what he did during World War I, which is kind of weird. Samantha, hey, I just left my house. We live north of Houston, and I have a load on board, and I'm heading towards northern Indiana. I am cutting cross country towards Texarkana in East Texas, and there's a sign right there, Lufkin 53. Okay, there is no convenient way to get from where I live to heading northeast. It's all this cross country through the woods stuff, which is what we're doing right now. I don't really drive all that fast anyway, but that's what I'm doing. So anyway, rolling into World War II, they got a test bed, which was the Chinese got to fight in China and Manchuria, and the Germans got to test out their weapons and their new air power and their new air force in Spain in the Spanish Civil War. Gave them an operation to do that. And going into World War II, World War II officially started in September. My name is Ryan. Then why does it come up? It says my name is Ryland, but it says Samantha Russell is what it's coming up as. So I don't get that. I'm just saying what it says on the screen. The first generation fighter plane was the World War I, and the second generation of the fighter aircraft was World War II, the monowing. That's why you hear on TV right nowadays you're talking about 5th gen, which is the latest super duper fighters. But there was a mixture at the very beginning of the war of Gen 1 and Gen 2, like when the Polish Air Force had the best of Generation 1, which is the monowing planes, but they couldn't compete. Bobby, name a car for an edit? Name a car for an edit. I don't know, Camaro. How about that? And Bobby says, did you fart? No. How do you know what it smells like in here? It smells like roses in here. The thing about air-to-air combat is pilots will shoot down another aircraft or will claim to shoot down another aircraft, and no matter what country you're flying for and no matter what aircraft you're flying for, they started doing the numbers and adding them up after the wars have ended, and the numbers are exaggerated by 100% across the board. It's perception, it's confusion, but if you take all the kills by all the countries, you can cut the claimed kills in half and be pretty accurate as to how many aircraft were actually shot down. And that's across the board. In the Korean War, were the NATO nations, the United Nations were fighting against North Korea. They were fighting against Chinese pilots. They were also fighting Soviet pilots. And at the time, the Soviets said, oh, no, we're not there. Yeah, they were. There were times when you get into this one air-to-air maneuver called a rolling scissors, where basically the aircraft are canopy to canopy, and they're spinning around in circles trying to slow down and get behind each other. And both of them are frantically dropping air brakes. And you would look up, and you would see the guy on the other side looking up back at you, and it's a white dude looking at you. It was pretty obvious what's going on. And then after the Soviet Union went out of business in the early 90s, soon after that happened, they opened up their files, and yes, they confirmed that Russians and Soviet pilots were fighting American pilots during the Korean War. So that actually happened. I don't even know what you guys are talking about. What is your name? Whose name are you asking for? It doesn't say. And to give you a number about the kills, the claimed kills, if you take the top 100 German aces of World War II and you add up all the kills they claimed, they shot down more aircraft than were lost. That's just the top 100. And then there was this weird spot where a plane would get shot to pieces, but it would somehow make the flight back to base and land, and they'd look at it and they'd write it off. But that wasn't considered a kill, even though the aircraft actually was destroyed. Because it flew back, it was considered an operational loss due to an accident or something else. They had a way of manipulating figures. Okay, whose name are you asking? Because I got like 5 people on here right now. It says on the screen, top fans, and I just read top farts. Me? Oh, my name is Scott. Blame my mother. Yeah, I've written a series of books back, it's been 8-9 years ago, and they're on Amazon Kindle. They're ebooks. I edited them the best I could, but they still need more editing. And that's kind of how I vented my ideas and how my brain works. And since then, I got to speed up here, hold on. Speed limit went up and I got cars piling up on me, stand by. And I was writing Amazon books, and then I found out about YouTube, and now I just run my mouth. It's easier. But I've got 5 books on Amazon Kindle. They're freebies. Mostly the topic is actually drug smuggling, because I come from a flying background and I know a whole bunch of people who used to be in that line of work. So I kind of combined what they taught me and wrote about it. And it's kind of with the new technology, I don't think it goes on anymore. But anyway, air-to-air combat has changed so much over the years. And, you watch the Top Gun movies where they're mixing it up, and it's, if you've watched on the movie, they fly, it's a beautiful sunny day and everybody can see each other and they're in close, and they're doing, in the modern world, air-to-air combat, you are not even in the same sky with the other person. You're picking them up electronically and firing at them from insanely long distances. All right, I gotta slow down and let this guy who's in a really big hurry. There, go, dude. Hurry. Jeez. What's your mom? My mom's name is Mom. What kind of silly question is that? Or my crazy mother. And she might be 80 years old, but I can take her in a fist fight 2 out of 3 times. Just wanted you to know. Now, with the way electronics are today, I can tell you, this is going back 40 years ago. The Phoenix missile, air-to-air missile, had a range on like 125 miles. So you would lock something up in the distance, punch this missile off. It would climb up to some incredible altitude and come down and blast them, and they're still 100 miles away. So you don't get a lot of that up close, face-to-face air-to-air. It's just not how the world works anymore. But that's what I was thinking about this morning, was how air combat was created and how it continues. And the top ace of all time is a guy named Eric Hartmann, who was a German pilot, and he fought on the Eastern Front during World War II. He flew a 109, and his official kill count was 352, which it's safe to say he shot down a lot of aircraft, but the Germans would count an aircraft that was shot to pieces sitting on the ground. If you strafed it and blew it up, they counted that as a kill, which is kind of, I don't think, that's how that works. But the guy, when World War II ended, he was picked up by the Soviets, the Russians, when the war, and he turned himself in. And the guy, when they were processing him after the war, because he didn't get captured or anything, they actually shot down a plane the last day of the war. And he got, turned himself into their whatever captivity, and they asked him his name and found out, and they stopped, and then they dragged him off to some higher up headquarters, and they looked at him, and I've seen a picture of this guy, he looks like he's 13 years old. He's this little blonde-haired little kid, and he got invited. They dragged him into basically their Air Force headquarters, and they all wanted to see what this guy looked like that was just tearing them up during the war. And they were like, dude. And they were, in awe of him, and they didn't treat him bad. They were like, they respected his capabilities as a pilot. And I was very fortunate years ago. I was flying Katrina. Do you remember Katrina, the storm? I was an operational helicopter pilot at the time, and that was in 2005, and my company got contracted like everybody else. And I got to fly during Katrina. And the Baton Rouge Airport, everything moved to the Baton Rouge Airport, which is not a very big place. And there were helicopters everywhere. It was an absolute madhouse. They closed one of the runways, and they just parked helicopters on it. And they had some hangars. One of the other pilots grabbed me one day. We weren't flying at that particular moment. And we wandered over the hangar, and he cracked a door open, and there was an ME-109 or a BF, I don't know which is which, parked inside the hangar. Perfectly beautiful airplane sitting there. And it was like, dude, so of course we're, as pilots, you can't resist. We go in and start looking at it. And the guy said it had been restored. It was found in the early 90s somewhere out in the woods in Siberia somewhere. They had found the wreckage, and it was restored, and it was operational. It was absolutely beautiful. And a couple of things about that plane up close. It is freakishly small. In my brain, the airplane would be bigger, but it was really, really tiny. It went operational. The 109s went operational in 1935 or 36. So it was a really good plane for the era, but as World War II warmed up, technology started leapfrogging, and it kind of got outdated. It kind of lost its leader status because the technology, they found out how to make a plane faster and flying quicker, turn sharper, and whatnot. And it had one design flaw that was good and bad. The landing gear on the plane, if you look at an American-made World War II plane, the landing gear curls up where the wheels are close together, and then when you open the gear, they spread out far apart. The Germans did it backwards. The mount point was on the frame to save on weight, and the wheels went further away from each other as they folded up, so the wheels were out towards the wings. The problem is it made for an awkward stance. The aircraft sat kind of awkward, and of all the German 109s that were lost during the war, 1/3 of them were lost in landing or takeoff accidents because of the landing gear design, which is bad. It says, what are you driving? I'm in my van. I'm officially retired from aviation. This is for Ryland, and I am driving my van, which is a Ford Transit 250. And there's a bunch of different sizes. I have the long wheelbase medium roof model. When I expedited previously, I had the super tall roof extended. Man, this one's a teeny bit smaller. Again, we're jumping off course here. Expediting, for people who don't do this, expediting is truck driving in a box van. It's the same job with less hassle. It's easier to get a single or 2 pallets going somewhere than it is to get a truckload. I don't mess with DOT. I don't have to operate under a CDL. It's like driving your car. It's relaxing. There's no time limits of how long I can drive. There's just a whole lot less hassle doing this. And the first time I had my big van, this is how I put it. You can get into this line of work heavy or light. And the first time I came in heavy. I got the super big van. We bought it new, outfitted it, and started driving. The problem is the operational costs of a brand new, very large van are a lot higher than this. This van I bought used. It's got some miles on it, but it runs like a top, and I took care of all the services on it. So I spent less than half the amount of money on this van to buy this particular one. And my gas mileage is quite a bit better because it's not pushing as much air out of the way. Now, the bigger van, you can carry a bigger load, but to be honest with you, 99% of my loads are 1 pallet. I can carry 3 and I can carry tall stuff, but the fact is I usually carry 1 pallet. 95% of it is 1 pallet, so you don't need a gigantic van to do this line of work. So that's why I'm driving the particular van that I have, that I like. And again, I bought it secondhand, spent a few $100 on it. I had because it were right at 100,000 miles, put some tires on it, swapped the air filter, spark plugs, drained and refilled the radiator, had to freshen the fluid, of course gave it an oil change, did a transmission oil change. And there's a sensor here screaming at me that I need to replace my brakes and the brake pads, but I spent all the money to buy discs and brakes, and we pulled them off, and they're fine. They're almost new, so I don't know, the sensor screwed up. But this van runs like a top, and it hasn't given me a lick of trouble, and I put quite a few miles on it, and I like it. It's comfortable. So anyway, back on target. I'm just thinking about the air-to-air combat. In World War II, air-to-air combat was huge, you know, and nowadays it's just the technology and the way the world changes. You're never going to see that again. You're never going to have these mass numbers of bombers flying in formations and fighter planes. You cut your leg? Well, don't do that. So anyway, the 109, the reason I was going back on, the reason I was talking about the 109, the one in that hangar, is the plane was beautiful. It was freakishly small because I thought it'd be a whole lot bigger. I mean, I could walk up behind the wing and look down into the cockpit. That's how small the plane was. And the pilot's seat was part of the airframe, so it's not like a mounted seat. And the cockpit is tiny. Teeny tiny, itty bitty, teeny tiny. I mean, if a person is over 5'5", I don't think they would fit in the cockpit. I was looking at it, and I'm 6'4", and there's a 0.0% chance I could get in there. It's not wide enough, and there's not near enough headroom in the cockpit. And it was really shocking for me to stick my head in there. So okay, I'm going this way. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my GPS, and I thought this was my turn. It's not. It wants me to go over here. Okay, I'll go over here to Groveton. 2.6 miles. And the cockpit just flops over on top of you, and I'm looking at just the width of the seat, and I'm like, no. And I'm looking at the height, measuring the height of the canopy to the seat. No. You'd have to be a fairly small person to get in there. You said he's in Minnesota. This is not Minnesota. This is Texas. I'm going towards northern Indiana. The actual town I'm heading for right now is called, well, tomorrow night it'll be Roanoke, which is southwest of Fort Wayne. And I've got a single pallet on here that is, I don't know what it is. It's in a pallet back here. I don't ask that many questions. Is it Minnesota? Well, good morning back at you. Yeah, I'm out here doing my run. I'm doing my drive. I was trying to get on last week, but I found out at work, they called and they said, oh yeah, during the week of the 4th of July, all the factories shut down for the week because it's the middle of the year. And I was like, oh, that's great. So I couldn't really drive last week. So I had one dry run, and I got a Houston to Austin run. And I kicked that out. And now I finally got this load. I made a video about this. I dropped the load in Austin, and Austin is a horrible place for expediter. There's just nothing. That whole part of the country, there's nothing going on. You can get a drop, but you can't get a load. And for some freak of nature, I picked up a load in Austin at the same place I dropped at, and that's never happened anywhere, let alone Austin. So that's the load I'm taking up here. But it's due. This load that I have in here is due noon on Monday. I'm going to drop it off as soon as wherever this place is opens Monday, so I get back on the clock. And I am real close to Grand Central for cargo, so I should have a really good week going on. And I don't even know, where are we? It's the second person I've seen walking down the side of the street. Donuts, aka Fat Pills. Fell down the stairs. Whoa, I'm slowing down here. Well, don't fall down the stairs. That's what handrails are for. Oh, Trinity. Is this Trinity? Or is this Trinity County? Oh, Groveton. I'm in the town of Groveton. Never heard of it. getting ready to make a turn now. On to 355.94. Hold on here. Is it this right here? Yeah, they're saying it's this. That's a cop car right there. Look at that. All right. I'm turning on it. You really want me to go on this road? Wait a minute. Nope, I missed by one. Hold on, here we go. What is that? Well, Tony, you have a lot of free time on your hands, don't you? What's fun about these little towns that you'll find in Texas is they all have antique stores. I do not understand why this is turning me like this. Okay. Let me go. Are you watching this? Okay, here we go. This apparently goes through. I don't know why it zigzagged me down here, but look at this. Wow. Talking about following your GPS off the map and going into the ocean. Jeez. I go slow because I have a semi-tall van, but I have a magnetic antenna for my CB. And there it goes. Yeah, I hear you. Don't complain. Yeah, my antenna's slapping the bushes. I don't know why this GPS just did this. All right, here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. All right, back on the road. That made absolutely no sense. Okay, moving along. Whew. Now it's high school. Okay. Back on the road. But anyway, if anybody has a topic of discussion, I am open to that. Okay, bulldozed. Yeah, I listened to audiobooks going down the road, and the one I was listening to was talking about combat and the numbers, and everybody exaggerates their kills, and they don't necessarily do it intentionally. It's just there's a lot of confusion. Like in World War II, the Germans would attack the bomber formations, and when you're pulling heavy G maneuvers in an aircraft, you want to keep a positive load, which is the gravity going towards your rear end. So German pilots would dive into a formation, fire, and they'd flip the plane upside down and pull, so the positive G's are going down. And they had a turbocharger on the engine, and when they would really goose the throttle, it would give off a puff of smoke off the bottom of the plane. So a plane would flash through a formation, fire a burst at this or that, and then they would turn and pull and give off a puff of smoke, and 50 people would shoot at it. And they would see the puff of smoke, and they would assume, oh, that was me, I shot it down. But no, you didn't. Nobody shot it down, but 50 people would claim it as a kill. That happened. And that was kind of the nature of what they were doing. So that's where you get some of those numbers. And the bombers kind of came into their own during World War II. They were experimenting with them, like Manchuria and, like I said, the Spanish Civil War. But bombers came into their own during World War II. But that was the bomber war, because by the time the Korean War started 5 years after the end of World War II, they had these fast-moving jets. Now, the bombers had guns on them, defensive weapons, but they weren't designed to track jet fighters. They weren't designed to go that fast, and they used B-29s. Remember, World War II ended in 1945, and the B-17 was the bomber that started the war. They used the B-29s, the big ones, in the Pacific, and by 1947, the B-17 was considered obsolete and got retired. So they were out of service. So it was the B-29 they used in Korea, and they used them in daylight raids on some North Korean targets. And when the jets got involved, a lot of them got shot down. A whole bunch of them, like a ridiculous number of them got shot down because they couldn't defend themselves, and the defending fighters couldn't do the job like they did during World War II. So the whole concept of bomber formations ended early in the Korean War, and they've never used them since. That was the time past it. They still use them, it's just they had to use them in smaller groups and whatnot. Okay, we're back on this country road. I set my cruise on 62. I'm getting 22.7 miles per gallon, which is pretty good out of this van. The speed limit out here is 70, in case anybody's wondering. My wife and I went on that big trip here a week ago. We flew to Chicago, got on a train, rode across the United States up north to Seattle, and if you go into my playlist, you'll see, under a vacation, you'll see some video we shot, the areas we went, and I mounted I put a phone mount on the window, and I filmed out the window for periods of time to see what the terrain looked like. And one of the things that absolutely shocked me on that trip is I have worked on and off for a friend of mine down here in Texas that restores classic cars and builds show cars and whatnot. And the 1950s, 1960s model cars are what everybody likes to get their hands on to restore. Good morning from Michigan. I'm jealous. It's not hot up in Michigan, James. And down here, those cars are getting really, really hard to find. You know, you don't find them sitting around unrestored. People have snatched them up. And something what he taught me is if you're driving down a road and you see an old car sitting in somebody's yard and it's just sitting there and you're on a main road, don't waste your time asking if it's for sale, because everybody and their brother has stopped and asked them if it's for sale. And either they want way too much for it or they're, quote, going to restore it here in the near future, which means they're not going to do anything to it. That's common. But the availability of 1950s and 60s model cars to restore is very low. Bro. Well, I'm up there on a train, and the train occasionally follows the interstate and the Amtrak, but a lot of times it doesn't. You're off the beaten path. And you're cruising along, and I opened Waze, I cheated, and we're going like 75, 80 miles an hour on this train. And we're cruising along, and behind these barns where you can't see them from anywhere are 1950s and 60s model cars just sitting there rotting in the weather. And I'm not talking about one or two, I'm talking about a dump truck load of them. I mean, literally, you see three behind one barn, you go, whoa, wait a minute. Before your brain can process it, you'd see another one. And then you go one Mississippi, two Mississippi, another one. So if you are looking for a classic car to restore or turn into pro touring or whatever, go into Montana, go up to Wisconsin, and start driving around on backcountry roads. I was stunned at the number of vehicles up there that are prime restoration projects, because I was thinking the inventory was pretty much gone. It's not. They exist. Well, here we go. The one great advantage of driving on these back roads versus the interstate is at least the scenery's a little better. You get to see more. It's showing 80 degrees outside. I'm going 62. 22.6 miles per gallon on cruise, which for a van is decent. Oh, honey, don't dress like that. Jeez. I don't even know where I am on the map right now. Anybody have a topic of discussion? Good morning from me. Hey, James, what part of Michigan are you from, by the way? My recent travels up there, I went up to Grand Rapids, and that area north and west of there, I found to be rather attractive. I thought it was a good-looking area. I liked the feel of it, and I liked the looks of it. So if you have an opinion. as an expediter, I buy my fuel at Pilot/Flying J. They merged for a couple of reasons. They have an app, and as a veteran, I get a 10-cent per gallon discount, and I get 10% off products I buy in the store, which everything in the store is overpriced, but I do it anyway. But I buy my fuel there, and your fuel purchases, as long as you buy at least, I think you had to buy at least 15 gallons at one setting, you get a half a credit towards a shower. We call them shower credits. And I build up shower credits doing that. Also, it's a place to park overnight in most cases, not all. In most cases, it's a place you can park overnight and sleep. But some exceptions, like California. And in the app, you can open the app and you can click on location, and it will show you on the map. You can move the map around where all the Pilot Flying J's are. So you can see up the highway you're traveling 20 miles away, you can tap it. It'll tell you the prices of fuel. And then you go tap the next one, the prices change. So you can kind of plan where you're going to go, which is kind of a convenient way of traveling. And also, you can use it as you say, go there, it'll actually navigate you to it. And when you're looking for a place to spend the night, something I discovered is scroll through that. Once you've tapped on the one you're eyeballing, scroll through the information and see how many parking spaces they have. If it says, and this is for big trucks, if it says 30, that means it's a very small gas station with a very small parking lot. If it says 150, that means it's really big, and you want big, because big means huge parking lots and more space to park, and you kind of look for the right setup. And I found out the hard way, you don't want to stay at a truck stop that's inside of a big city, like Nashville or Knoxville or something like that. You want to get out of the town, because there's the nefarious characters wandering around, kind of make it, shall we say, awkward. And I found that out, and I actually pulled into one. I'm looking around going, no. And then I dialed up one that was outside of the city, went out there, and it was nice and clean and quiet. There was nobody around. That's kind of what you're looking for. Of course, out in California, the only Pilot I found was in a town, and the parking lot wasn't very big, and there was like 10 expediters sitting there. And at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock at night, some security guard comes walking around, starts banging on doors, and woke everybody up. You can't park here. You can't stay over. And I'm like, where the hell are we supposed to go? So I had to drive around and find a hidey hole somewhere. And one of the unofficial hidey holes I discovered from my flying experience was small airports. If you know how to use the system, you can find a good place to park at a little airport and have access to a bathroom and or a shower. So like I said, has anybody got a topic? Something about starting in World War II, back to the air-to-air combat, is they put gun camera. And a helicopter I flew in the Army, I flew the Cobra attack helicopter. When you fired a missile, not rockets, but a missile, or the guns, it would record until you let go of the trigger. It would play for like 2 more seconds and record what you were doing. In World War II in Korea, you could pull the trigger to the first detent and it would run the camera. And if you pulled the second detent, it would fire the guns. So if a plane was going down and you wanted to record it, if you'd already shot it up, you would line up your aircraft on it and pull that first trigger and aim at so you're filming the crash to get the credit and whatnot. But what they found out early in the war was, and they didn't even fix this by Korea, is you'd fire the gun, the camera would turn on, and when you let go, the camera would turn off. Well, you're firing a burst. You don't have an unlimited quantity of ammunition. So you'd fire a burst, and the bullets wouldn't even arrive on target, and the camera would go off. Because the bullets got to get there. I mean, so they didn't really have that set up properly. But I think now they have that delay where it'll stay rolling for a little while, a few extra seconds to make sure it records what happened. going 62, and I don't know how this looks on film, but it feels like I'm going really fast through here. At nighttime, you go through areas like this, you got to be super careful because deer jump out in front of you pretty regular. And they make those little deer whistle things. Trust me, they don't work. I've had deer standing on the side of the road with a pair of deer whistles up there screaming. The deer don't even look up. They don't care. But I should get one of those grills on this thing so it doesn't cause that problem. Hey, Thomas, what's up? Started talking about the history of air combat, and it has now turned into the history of everything. Late in World War II, the Japanese were doing the kamikaze thing. And they were taking people and giving them rudimentary flight training. And when I say rudimentary, they didn't even fly. They just put them in a little box and they moved the controls around and they shook the box to show them what it did. So they had no flight training. So their first solo flight, the first time they actually flew, was they were going on their mission. And you'd have, I'm making up numbers, 10 kamikaze pilots, and you would have one actual pilot that was the guy they were following. And they would just follow him to the area, and then he would peel off, and the kamikazes would dive in and do their thing. And he would report success or failure, and then he'd fly back, and they'd grab the next load of quote-unquote volunteers. So they had no flight training. By that time in the war, the American aircraft were pretty high-tech and were outperforming the Japanese aircraft by a wide margin. And pilots would be a CAP, the CAP, the Combat Air Patrol, would be out there to protect the fleet. And here comes the radar would pick up these kamikazes coming in from 50, 60 miles out, and the CAP would go out there, and these pilots would line up and do a lazy, shallow dive on the back end of this kamikaze formation to a plane that's not maneuvering. He's just flying in a straight line, and they would get real close and give one little squirt and shoot down a plane, then slide over and give a squirt and shoot down another one, and they would basically give little bursts and shoot down all these planes until they ran out of ammunition. So a guy would be, there was one guy, there's a famous photograph of a pilot holding up his hands with a big smile on the deck, and he's holding up 6, 5 one fingers and one, because he technically shot down 6 planes. Well, yeah, shooting down a kamikaze flying in a straight line versus, getting in air-to-air combat with something different, but you're still getting credit for for what you did. That's one of the reasons the kamikazes were not very effective, is they were getting shot to pieces. Oops, back up again. Here we go. The Japanese also experimented with kamikaze boats, little motorboats full of explosives with a big long rod on the front of it, and they would race out and crash into the side of the ship, and they're motoring around at 20 and 25 knots in a fleet loaded with anti-aircraft guns and people watching them. They said they were just target practice, because you can't go racing up on a formation and shooting up, because you got 20 millimeter cannons everywhere, people looking at you, and you're not moving fast enough. So they were shooting those to pieces just for fun. I don't think they ever had any successes with that. Everybody's in a big hurry today. I got a guy coming up on me pretty hard right now. Sorry, dude. I don't drive that fast. That's why I'm hugging the shoulder and letting him see past me. This route I'm on, I don't even know what this road is. Also, it's 94. I'm on Highway 94 going northeast bound through the woods. This is going to zigzag me up to Texarkana, and I'll get on 30, and 30 will take me through Arkansas. I go through Little Rock, and then I hit Memphis, the west side of Memphis, and the interstate turns north. and that's when I head north. And I'm going to go, as long as I'm awake, I'm going to continue up north until I get tired, and then I'll find some place to hole up for the night. And because of my job and I'm on the road all the time, I have a membership to Gold's Gym, to Planet Fitness. I don't know where that came from. Because, well, I go work out somewhat, and I use their treadmill, but they have showers. Is that up? Those are turkeys. No? That's all. What was that? Wow. Anyway, some animal on the side of the road. And Thomas said hi. Hey, back at you, Thomas. We're motoring from north of Houston towards northern Indiana right now with a pallet. That's our mission today. But I'm going to make this a 2-day drive because the load here isn't due until Monday. Technically at noon, I'm going to be dropping it off at, well, as soon as they open in the morning. I don't even know the name of the company this is going to. But unless it's a really, really big operation, they're not going to be open on the weekends. You go to, Ford Motor Company or GM or something, they'll be open 24 hours. But regular businesses are not. There's a guy in a big hurry. Actually nice out here today. Let's see, since I've loaded up this morning, I've gone 83 miles so far. This is like an 1,100 mile drive. Come on, somebody give me a topic. I run my live streams for about an hour, and we're on 47 minutes. Unless something interesting happens, I usually cut it off in an hour. Kind of habit. That thing that happened in Iran here a couple weeks ago, that B-2 bombing mission, they don't park, to my knowledge, from what I can remember, they do not park the B-2 outside of the United States. Those are billion-dollar aircraft, and they're heavily guarded, and they take off here in the States, and they go on their mission somewhere on the planet. They do in-flight refueling, all computerized and whatnot, and the aircraft has 2 pilots. It also has a refrigerator, a microwave, a toilet, and a bed. So as long as, I have no idea what the inside of the cockpit looks like. If we're talking to pilots, as long as somebody is strapped into the seat, you're dynamite. The other guy can get up and move around, but they have a bed. They can literally go sleep while they're en route somewhere, so they can rotate. It's like living in a Winnebago. I mean, it's going to be a crowded Winnebago, but it's a Winnebago. And they do their mission. They in-flight refuel. And they fly all the way back. And I think they said on TV that mission they did was 36 or 37 hours straight, which seems realistic. And the B-2 is made of what the military calls RAM, which is radar absorbing material. And it's also shaped in a way that when a radar hits it, because it doesn't have the angular parts, it actually bounces. What is all this? Well, that was a bag of trash. It bounces and sends the reflection a different direction. And they have all the sensors on board that tells you where the radar stations are, and they kind of glance away from it. Again, to my knowledge, the only problem they have with radar reflectivity is rain. If the airframe gets wet, I know that causes, because the water is solid, just having moisture on the airframe causes reflectivity to the radar, and that can be an issue. And the one time the aircraft's actually exposed to radar is when you open the bomb bay doors, because the bomb bay now is open and it gives a different shape. It exposes the guts of the airframe. So they open the doors, and all of a sudden you can be seen. You drop your cargo and you slap the doors closed, and then you're back to disappearing. So that's their one vulnerable moment. But apparently they flew 6 of them into Iranian airspace, and they were unseen, completely unseen. They did their thing, and then they turned and left. And the way a bunker buster works is it's heavy, and it has a delay of the detonation, whereas a bomb hits the ground and goes boom. This one hits the ground nose down, and there's a split-second delay before it detonates. And by the time it goes boom, it's dug a hole. And from, again, what I watched on the computer and what I watched on the news, the bomb, the first one, went down, dug a hole, went boom, and then a round came in behind it, another one, and went in basically into the same hole so it could burrow even deeper. Past that one, and it went boom, and then you get into a mountain or into a rock formation and send this huge 30,000-pound shock wave. It's going to collapse a lot of stuff. It's not only going to crush everything, it's going to collapse everything. So they use those for runways too. You bomb an enemy airfield, goes up under the runway and detonates underground and blows the runway up from underneath, and it makes a big old mess. Because explosives, generally speaking, if you lay an explosive charge out in an open field and detonate it, it's not going to do a lot. You have to compress it. You have to squeeze it. So you put something on top of it out in that open field, and now the boom has got something that it's got to fight against, and it's going to get the reaction you're looking for. So when you burrow it into the ground and it's surrounded by pressure on all sides, yeah, it's going to get interesting, the effect it has. Remember the Gulf War, they were dropping small penetrators, Iraqi bunkers that had aircraft. They'd put the crosshairs on top of the bunker, and the munition would hit the bunker, make a little poof on top, and then it would detonate and blow the door off from the inside. Oops. If anybody's interested, I paid $2.41 for gas yesterday. The only place I avoid at all costs for fuel purchases is Illinois. They've got, well, California, of course, but the gas in Illinois is always 60 or 70 cents higher than the surrounding states. What town is this? Doesn't say. The speed limit is 55, I'm being a rebel, and I'm going 62. Alright, I need a topic, people. I need 7 minutes, I need a topic. I have a new air conditioner in here, a rolling air conditioner like you have in your house, portable. What's that say? All stars go. It says hi back. Credit for creativity. Let's slow down a little bit here. I actually run radar in here. I don't really need it, but when you're going through these little towns, it's nice to have. Because on the interstate, I don't speed. I'm actually under the speed limit. But when you're cutting cross country, especially at night, going through these little towns, you need radar because these guys are crazy. I went through one town once where they had radar traps on both ends of town as you're coming in. As the speed limit drops, people have a tendency to drag their feet on the slowdown, and they know that. Guy's gonna mow that giant yard with a weed whacker. Seem efficient. And there we go. It's that guy coming at us right there. As I was saying, small town looking to pluck some money off people, road pirating, as you say. run CB, but CB is quiet. Samantha again, how you doing? I got about 5 more minutes on this live stream. Whoa! That was loud. I got about 5 more minutes on this unless someone comes up with something here we can work with. For anybody popping in now, we're just heading. I'm left north of Houston here a little over an hour ago. I'm heading towards northern Indiana. I've got a small pallet in here of whatever it is. And it's due Monday, but I'm driving up here Saturday, Sunday, making a lazy drive. So I'm up here on Sunday. It says if I go non-stop, I'll be there at 1 in the morning. I don't want to drive non-stop. I'm not that big of a hurry. Porch fell over. I'm always fascinated by these little towns where you see these businesses that have... Ooh, there's an old car. What is that? These little towns that have businesses that have... the building looks like something from the 1930s and it's closed. And it's been closed for decades. You're curious what it was, and I always wonder, what was it like the last day it was open? What was it like that day when they finally closed their doors and said, that's it? I know. CB radios are shockingly quiet these days. A little more activity on the open highway, but off here. In case you're wondering about a CB radio, they're still useful, not as busy as they used to be back in the day, but due to current law, your radio cannot, the new radios being made cannot be more than 4 watts, not that anybody's going to check. And there are ways of boosting that, but the range on your radio is directly proportionate to the height of your antenna, and generally speaking, it's 1 mile per foot. And I am currently running a 36-inch antenna, so I have a 3-mile range on my CB, reception and transmission. And anything outside of that is really not relevant. And yes, I use my radio. Okay, we're coming up on a turn here. Here we go. We're going to be getting on... This is Navasota. We might be coming up on Navasota. We're going to circle around it on 287. No, I lied. Lufkin, same difference. The company I used to fly for had a helicopter up here. I don't know if they do anymore. Medical helicopter in Lufkin. I landed there and got gas once. I'm going to coast up on this. Bodacious barbecue. I find myself on a YouTube kick, where somebody takes Texas barbecue and introduces it to people from New Zealand, Great Britain, places like that, and lets them try it. And I get a kick out of watching how they respond to it. And one guy, an older guy, tried it, and he took a bite of brisket, real live, honest to God, Texas brisket, and he said the meat was on the precipice of turning into a liquid, and that's how perfect it was. And if you haven't had real live, honest to God Texas barbecue, you're missing out. And the Brits are very prim and proper, so they get out a fork and a knife and they go, whoa, 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 that's not how you eat this. You pick it up with your hands, hold the bone in one hand and eat. And I like watching the look on their faces when they try it. They're just stunned. And I've heard they give it to kids who are like 13, 14 years old. They were school kids. And the kid says, food should not be able to taste this good. But to watch their eyes roll back in their head and just go, because it's just, I mean, it's that good. There's a couple of places around Houston we need to go to. It's not a cheap meal. You're not going to get out of there for less than $60 a head. But it's just, they have it to a science. Texas barbecue is its own thing. And if you can find one, it's very expensive. It is worth every dime. Okay, so scoot right along on his electric bike. That's kind of cool. I don't know why I'm going through traffic lights, but this is part of the problem of getting up to Texarkana from Houston. There literally is no efficient way of doing this. And this is what we're doing right now. I'm driving. Well, apparently I latch onto Highway 59 up here, which is a major road, but it does go through a million towns and has traffic lights, and that sucks. So hold on here. If you are anywhere in the world, anywhere in the country watching this, and you get to Texas for a hotel, you're at a convention, make sure you ask somebody, where can I get real live Texas barbecue? And I don't mean some chain restaurant, some one-off. Again, it's not going to be cheap, but it's going to be worth it. It is an experience worth having. Excuse me. We're doing here 22.2 miles per gallon. That's not good. In case you're wondering, the higher you are in altitude, the better your gas mileage gets, which is why airplanes fly at really, really high altitudes. For catching a jet stream going east or west, you get a free push. There's also less wind resistance up there. But as it relates to your engine, and this is for aircraft turbine or piston or a car, the reason you get better gas mileage at altitude is every engine that burns fuel, turbine or piston, it's a mixture of fuel and air. And the higher you get, the less air you have. The less air you have, the less fuel you have to mix with it. Now you have less power, but you're technically burning less fuel. And once you're up to cruising speed in an aircraft or cruising speed in a car, you don't really need all that excess power. So if you're breathing less air, you're needing less fuel. So a car that gets 25 miles per gallon just on average at sea level might get 28, 29 miles per gallon in Colorado, just because the engine doesn't need as much fuel. Now it's going to feel like you lost a cylinder because of the altitude, but it will give you better gas mileage. That's why I'm down here. My mileage is 22.2, which this thing's only rated 18, so I'm getting above, but when I get up a little bit of altitude on the East Coast, it gets up into the 23s sometimes. And this is a nickel and dime game, so a little bit better gas mileage didn't hurt anybody's feelings. Where's my turn? 59 North Nacogdoches. Coming up. Okay, this is Lufkin. There's a pilot right here in front of me. I don't think you can see it on the screen, but it says 275 for gas. That's 275 minus the dime I get for having the app and being a veteran. I don't need fuel. I'm still sitting on 7/8 right now. Now, when I had my flying job, when I was still working as a pilot, I had a car just to commute to work because they sent me all over the country. I bought a Mini Cooper because it's quick and it's good on gas. It's only good for one or two people, but that's why I had that car. Put this guy in. Alright, you're in, I'm back. Boy, that's a brand new Toyota dealer and the lot's almost empty. I was doing this job expediting right back when COVID kicked off. I was flying tours of the Grand Canyon, helicopter tours at the Grand Canyon West Airport, and about 2/3 of our passengers were from mainland China. So when COVID kicked off, The air travel between China and the United States disappeared, and accordingly, okay, where is this guy? On the shore. Accordingly, our traffic disappeared, and the whole Grand Canyon pretty much shut down. There was nobody up there. Our company was hurting, but the companies that had 30 and 40 aircraft, they were really hurting. And I started doing this job, and that's when the chip shortage was going on. That was crazy. You delivered chips to a big car manufacturer, and they would get all excited when the van would pull up. Oh, there he is, right there. Okay, there's a speed trap. So speed was 55, I was going 57. And where he's shooting himself in the foot is he's got his headlights on. That's advertising that he's sitting there. So I was a teeny bit over, but not enough to get anybody's attention. And that's why I run radar in these small towns. Coming up on a turn. All right. Hey, I'm going to go ahead and cut this off here. I got to pull off in a minute. I'll catch up with you guys probably tomorrow.